When it comes to bass fishing, there's probably no better bait than the jig. The problem is if you're just getting into it, or even if you've been doing it for a while and using one type of jig, there's a lot of options on the market. So today, we're gonna break down the 4 main different types of jigs. First type of jig we're gonna cover is the good old-fashioned swim jig. These feature a long, slender head, which allow it to swim through the water with ease, like the name implies, a light weed guard, which keeps it from hanging up in cover, and also some sort of keeper on the back to hold your soft plastic trailer on. A swim jig is designed to imitate panfish and shad and is meant to basically be cast out and just reel back in. You don't have to get too fancy with it. You pull it out of the package, put a trailer on it, and you can start catching fish. Make it look like something swimming through the water, and they're gonna eat it. It works the best around really light cover when the weeds aren't matted up to the surface. So that's why you see it a lot in the spring and the fall. Not that you can't catch them year round on it, but when that grass isn't quite matted out to the surface, that's when this guy shines. Next up is the football jig, and like the name implies, it's got a football-shaped head. It also can come with or without a weed guard, and just like the swim jig, has a molded keeper to help hold your trailer on. But the best part about a football jig is that shape helps it crawl over rocks and wood really well, hard cover. When this head crawls across the bottom, it beautifully imitates a crayfish. It can also imitate a bluegill if fish are offshore feeding on schools of bluegills too. But generally, if they're eating crayfish, you want to throw a football jig. Flippin' jig is next on the list, and like the other jigs, it has a weed guard, it has a hook keeper, but probably the biggest difference with it is it has a little more slender round head, which helps it slide into cover better, but it also has this big gaff on it, a really big hook, heavy wire hook. You're generally fishing this thing on braided line, which is why you need a stout hook so you don't bend it out. A flippin' jig, like it says, you flip it into grass, you flip it into heavy vegetation, pockets and stuff. You can fish it in deeper grass, you can flip it in a lay down. Basically anywhere you think one is living or has a house, this jig will go in and get them. The final jig we're going to talk about is a skipping jig. These are kind of a niche type jig, especially if you're just getting into bass fishing. You might not use these that much, but the biggest difference from this jig and the rest of them is it has a very flat back of the head and it's a little more broad. That really helps give it more surface area to easily skip across the water as you're trying to get it underneath boat docks, laydowns, pontoon boats, whatever it is. That head really helps the process. Of course, it has a brush guard to keep it out of all the bad stuff you're trying to get it into. A big hook, because again, you're probably throwing this on really heavy fluorocarbon or on braided line. On some skipping jigs, it actually features a screw lock instead of a barbed trailer keeper. That really helps hold it on, because as this thing's flying across the surface of the water, that trailer sometimes, especially if you've caught a fish or two, will want to get pulled down to the bottom of the shank. So that screw really helps hold it on, lock it in there, and make sure you have the perfect presentation when your jig gets right in the strike zone.